Hello and welcome to FireDEV, a fireside chat with great people from the industry. Today I have Ransom Wydner here with me, and I just want to, thank you, Ransom, for coming on to the podcast today. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much. Great to be here.
No problem. Just to confirm, am I pronouncing your name correctly, Ransom Wydner?
Perfect. Yeah, the first name people get right most of the time. Last name people don't usually get right. So good work.
Okay, what do people say, like Wydner or?
Yeah, Wydner or I'll get Windiger. It's like there's no G. How did you?
Oh,
I'll get some really weird things. Yeah.
I've had it myself where they start adding letters, and I think, are you? Do you just have an alphabet open in front of you? Are you just
Yeah.
picking letters right now?
Thumbing through a dictionary right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like that
All
sometimes.
the data is right there in the name. That's all you get.
Yeah,
All the letters you need are there in my name. Yeah.
yeah. So first of all, I just want to talk about part of your career part of it that really interested me was you working on WeWork.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I've got a few questions about WeWork. Well, first of all, what did you do there?
At WeWork, I was an enterprise account manager. So WeWork bought a company I worked for. I worked for a company called Team, and Team's still around. They've been acquired a couple times. They do like office space utilization data. Basically, it's an iPad on the wall outside of the conference room, so you can see what's going on in there. You can book it, that kind of thing.
Ah, yes, I've seen
You've
that
probably
sort of
seen those
stuff.
around, yeah. So
Yeah, okay.
WeWork bought that company in 2018, and so I became a WeWork employee. Had never heard of WeWork before then.
Hmm.
So what I did at WeWork was enterprise account management. So I managed a lot of our biggest accounts, and it was fun. It was an interesting time, navigating through two purchases, making people feel safe and okay as the company that they do business with changes hands more than once. So it was pretty intense.
Okay. And so, because you said it's been sold a few times.
No, yeah. Let's see. I forget who owns them now. It's a bunch of companies merged, but it was so WeWork sold Team to a company called iOffice,
Okay.
and that was when I left WeWork. When they sold to iOffice, iOffice is a great company. I've got a lot of friends who still work there, but when WeWork sold Team to iOffice, I didn't really know what was going to happen next with it. I want to do something different, and so that's when I started at 650. I think it's now part of. Ooh, I want to say it's like Impura or something. We work, sold them to iOffice. iOffice merged with some other company in that space, like Condeco or something. I want to say, and now they've got a new, like office space management consortium called something like Impura. It's a brand new thing and it's a made up word.
Okay.
So I'm not
So,
100% sure.
yeah. So, what was the reasoning for buying and, I guess ultimately selling the company as well? Because what did, uh, obviously they wanted that, I guess, the technology, but then they sold this.
Yeah.
What was
Oh,
the reasoning behind buying it and selling it?
I don't know if you remember in 2016, 2017, 2018, this is when all that money was coming into Silicon Valley. You
Oh,
had
yes.
sovereign wealth funds just dumping tens of billions of dollars into Silicon Valley. And
I'm very aware of
yeah.
all that stuff that was going on, and
Uh,
some questions focused around that in a second. But you
oh
carry on.
yeah. So that was the environment, and it was
Oh,
all about putting money into tech companies.
hmm,
And tech companies getting crazy valuations.
yeah.
And sometimes what would happen was a company thought, I don't know if like people make the argument, is Tesla a tech company? They build cars. Why are they a tech company and Ford isn't? Um, WeWork did office space management, and people were saying, why are you a tech company when Regis does the exact same thing
Hmm.
as you, but they're not a tech company and they're not valued at tens of billions of dollars. They're valued at something more like what a commercial real estate company would be valued at. And so WeWork really did believe, this wasn't just something they were saying, I don't think. They really believed that they were a tech company. They said, no, 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 the office space is part of it, but the technology is what powers it. So they went around part of that, part of creating a brand that we are a tech company. I wasn't involved in these decisions, so I can just say, uh, what it looked like to me and what it looked like, based on the conversations I had, was that WeWork wanted to fashion itself as a tech company. A good way to do that was to buy up some tech companies. So they bought Team, the company I worked for, around the same time that they bought a Conductor and Space IQ and Meetup. There's a period of time where they're buying a bunch of these small, promising tech companies that were related to what they did. So Team did office
Yeah.
space management. They rented out office space. So I thought, let's buy Team. So
Okay.
and then the reason they sold Team was same kind of thing in reverse. There was that pretty spectacular collapse of the
Hmm.
IPO, and all of their backers, all their financial backers were saying, "What are you doing? You're a real estate company. We need you to get back to being a real estate company." So, from where I was standing, at least, that seemed like the narrative. For the people who are getting who are being told, "Hey, by the way, you don't work for us anymore." So I remember coming in one day, and I was about to move to Australia for WeWork. They were going to open up an office there. I'd been working with my boss and his boss and her boss for months, trying to get everything set up to move to Australia from Salt Lake City. And I was on a business trip, and it sounded like we'd gotten the last thing done. And I show up to the office, and you know. Some of the big wigs are in front of a big group of people. I think this cannot be good. And they said, "Hey, yeah, so we're going to sell Team." And they said the same thing to Space IQ and a few others. All those companies landed on their feet, but it was basically a reverse of that earlier pivot. They initially bought Team and some other companies because they said, we're a real estate company, but we use technology. That's our edge. And then, about 2 years later, never mind, we're a real estate company. We have our own technology. We don't need these other tech companies. And that's when they sold those companies.
Okay. Do you think there was an element of them buying them, getting whatever tech secrets or techniques that, let's say, Team or whatever these companies had, and then be like, we got our own version now. It's cheaper than running a sub company and just selling it. Did you think there was an element of that?
It didn't, I think the cynic in me wants to think that that's something that happens, but I don't think so. In fact, something that was a little frustrating was we always felt like they they weren't using this technology. All these WeWorks all over the world. Whenever I'd go to a WeWork, if I wanted to reserve a room, it was actually kind of tricky. And I remember being frustrated, thinking, "You've owned this company that does room reservations for a year now, and you're not using any of this in any of your offices." That was, I was more frustrated by that than anything sinister. I think, it's a lot of us at the time were pretty frustrated. I was pretty frustrated. I wanted to move to Australia, and now I wasn't going to. But um, I don't I don't think they were trying to do anything too too shady or anything. I think it was just they weren't really prepared for it. The company never really got what do you call that, integrated into WeWork
Mm.
in the way that I think we had expected it to. And I'm sure that happens with a lot of these large acquisitions and you know mergers between totally different sized companies. Sometimes the culture felt pretty good. I thought we meshed really well, made a lot of friends at WeWork. Um, it seemed on paper like the tech would mesh really well, but I don't think that they stripped it for parts because I never saw those parts show up anywhere. I think that it was more they really did have a grand idea at some point, um, but that was just a company that was doing a lot of things. That was a nice lesson in focus on what you do well, do that really great, and if you try to expand too much into areas of and industries that your customers don't know you to be an expert at, it's at least in my experience doesn't turn out so great.
Yeah, I think there, may also have been an element of, like you alluded to just, now, that they bought a bunch of companies to act like a tech company, and probably got to a point where they acquired so many that they probably logistically couldn't, in the time frame that they had, let's say, where these companies, that they couldn't probably integrate them fast enough, and then they'll probably all the other hassles they were having with investors and all this other stuff, because it sounds more exciting to investors, these new technologies,
Oh, for sure.
than it
Yeah.
does. Oh, we bought this technology, and then for the last year we've just been integrating it. Whereas if they just keep saying, we got this technology, and kind of maybe hint that it's good, it's
Yeah.
installed or it's there, and then we got this new technology that we're buying. We got these two new ones that we're thinking about for next month. Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think on the sort of trajectory they were probably on, they probably just acquired too many, and you was, I guess,
Yeah.
maybe one of them. And I bet you there was probably a bunch they acquired and they integrated really well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Possibly.
Yeah, my understanding is that Conductor and a few other of those companies that they acquired, especially the ones they acquired early on, those did become part of the fabric of that company.
Mm.
And even though WeWork is a very different company now than it was 3 or 4 years ago, I think that some of those acquisitions turned out really well. I know that some of the people who they got who were acquired, so to speak, in those acquisitions of businesses, a lot of those people still work for WeWork. So, it wasn't all bad, and it wasn't it wasn't it, things good things came out of it for sure, I'd say. But as a person who working for a company getting acquired twice in as many years is pretty exhausting. So, there's definitely that side to it as well.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned one of the companies they acquired, Meetup. Is that
Mhm.
Meetup.com or is that some
Yeah.
other Meetup?
I think it's meetup.com is their URL, where it's all about that was one of their things was
Communities.
totally, yeah. And that's been their thing. I remember, I worked at a lot of WeWorks when I was working for WeWork, when I'd go and visit customers and that kind of thing. And community is everything. That's they've got their community managers, and it's all about community. So that I don't I think they spun off Meetup. I don't think that that's one of the companies that they kept. I'd have to check.
Yeah,
I'm
they
not sure.
did. I just had a quick Google.
Oh yeah.
Apparently, they sell in 2020. They sold it off to a company called Ali Corp. Yeah, because when they
Interesting.
said Meetup, I thought, is that the Meetup that you try and find like-minded
Yeah,
people and
definitely.
communities? And I mean, I guess it kind of fits into their ethos, because a friend of mine, he works at WeWork, not at work, but like he has
Mhm.
an office there.
At a WeWork, yeah.
Yeah, he has a little startup, and I've gone as a guest, because you can sign a person in as a guest.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I've been multiple times, so, and I've seen how it is. Once like 5-6 o'clock hits, and everyone comes out to the offices and
Yeah,
start playing ping pong, start having a
definitely.
drink, snacks, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I can definitely see where Meetup could get integrated with them. Did they ever do anything with it? Do you know, as in into their core business whilst they had it, or?
That's a good question. I know that they did meetup style things a lot. I remember, in New York especially, they would do little things to try to grow their customer base. They'd say, okay, we're gonna have a party at the Brooklyn WeWork, and it's gonna be people who are into graphic design. If you've got an office here, great, but you don't have to have an office here to come to this party. And that was part of how they'd get new people into their WeWorks. So I know they did those kinds of things. They did meetup style events, but I don't know if they ever actually integrated. And from my perspective, it seemed like there was just always so much going on that there wasn't really an opportunity to sit down and go, hey, we all have all this stuff, let's start integrating it. It was more, we're going to buy a tech company, um, because that burnishes our brand as a tech company. And I think that I worked with some really smart people. I think they had good plans that would have eventually gone somewhere, but it didn't look like, from my perspective, these tech companies were getting integrated.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
moving too fast.
yeah, they're probably just doing too much. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
pretty aware of this, story. I'm huge into tech, business
Yeah.
entrepreneurship and all that sort of stuff. So any company like that, especially when it becomes as popular as WeWork did, it's one of those things that I research. And yeah, they definitely was going pretty crazy. Talking about crazy, was he as crazy as a place as people say, and it's been made out to be, or not? In your experience.
I feel like right around the time that they bought Team, it was the craziness that you hear about, of like the summer camp parties and
Yes.
that kind of thing. That was kind of I feel like at least it was on the downside. Maybe it's just because they bought a company in Utah and Salt Lake City doesn't party as hard. But um, there wasn't, we weren't doing tequila shots on the sales floor, or any of this, the kind of the stories you hear about. I That wasn't my experience at WeWork, though. We did. I remember my first introduction really to the company was they did a giant meeting in downtown LA. They must have rented out every hotel room in downtown Los Angeles. It was crazy. It was like, a half dozen hotels
Jesus,
plus
that's a lot.
Airbnbs and stuff. It was nuts. The entire hotels, an entire JW Marriott just filled with WeWork people. So they flew, must have been thousands of people. I think I heard 10,000 people from
Mm.
all over the world to this, to this to these hotels around the Staples Center, and they just did this like multi-day event at the Staples Center, and there were open bars, and there was, it felt like a music festival or something. They rented out the entirety of Universal Studios Hollywood for the employees, and we just went around, could ride anything. That was kind of the extent of what I experienced. We did Team had organized a party called the World Experience, or I'm sorry, the Workplace Experience Summit in Park City, right around Sundance, and WeWork, was there kind of in force, and there was a lot of food, a lot of alcohol available, but it wasn't the like the summer camp vibes. Now, I
Yeah.
will say a few of the guys, a few of the people that were sort of the higher ups at Team, some of my friends who, like my boss, that kind of, a lot of the C levels and VPs, they had gone to summer camp the year before. When they first heard that WeWork was maybe looking at buying Team, uh, a bunch of them went to the summer camp. I think it's in the UK, or I don't think they still do it, but it was in the UK at the time, and and they said it was pretty wild,
Okay.
but it was wild like a party, and also wild like, like a humanitarian disaster. Like nobody's got, a place to charge their phone, or you know or there's the food is just basically, tomato and cheese sandwiches. So
Mm.
it was getting a little bit chaotic. But yeah, I wasn't part of I think the only time I ever did shots with a coworker was when we found out that WeWork was selling Team. I went over to the bar next door with with the vice president over customer success, because she had been working so hard on this Australia thing for me, and we were just like, well, I guess let's go do some shots of tequila. Other than that, not a whole lot of tequila drinking at Team, which I understand was a hallmark at the rest of WeWork. I think maybe it was just Team was kind of an island unto itself as this Salt Lake City based company, and Salt Lake City doesn't exactly have a reputation for hard partying. We do a good amount of it, but it's not what we're known for.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough.
Yeah.
Uh, so, did you ever watch the We Crashed TV show?
I watched a little bit of it. I read the book though, the Cult of
So
We. Uh,
I've got it on my shelf next to me.
yeah, that's a very interesting book. I really enjoyed that book. I felt like that was the show. I think is great. But I just read the book. I'm like, I don't know if I need to do this again. But love the book, and
Very
uh,
well written.
oh, incredibly well written. And it felt like part of this bigger thing that you see, that I feel like is correcting itself in Silicon Valley right now, where for a long time it was growth, growth, growth.
Hmm.
You've got you have huge companies worth 40, 50 billion dollars right now that have never made a profit, you know? And WeWork was sort of the poster child of that
Yeah.
style, you know, and I think that's my most favorite thing about the book was seeing behind the curtain on the finances a little bit, you know. And I do remember when WeWork first bought Team, and I found out that a lot of this money was Saudi Arabian uh, sovereign wealth fund money. I thought that was a little bit interesting, you know, given how WeWork says, you know, we won't even eat meat. You know, we couldn't eat meat anymore when WeWork took over Team. There was no more, you know, you could eat it, but they weren't going to pay for it.
Yeah,
Um,
because they was very strict because he was Jewish, wasn't he? The what's his
yeah, oh yeah,
name?
definitely.
Adam Newman and
Yeah, Adam
Rebecca.
Newman, Adam and Rebecca, I think are vegan, and so
Yeah,
yeah, and as part of their, they they study Kabbalah, and you know, so that felt like it didn't jive with taking a lot of money from the Saudi government, you know, who at that time it was kind of building a pretty bad reputation for human rights, and so I brought that up to a manager, and they were like, "Look, we can't give back. We're not going to give back this money, so you're just going to have to deal with it." But that was, you know, that kind of era of Silicon Valley of just gobbling up. It didn't matter what investment you needed. It was, I want to get as much investment as I possibly can, grow as quick as I can, and it doesn't matter if we ever make a profit, you know? And those kind of businesses uh, have they still are around, but I feel like you're seeing that change a little bit, you know, where somebody said, I forget, some tech writer said that today's startups need to be camels, not unicorns. And
mm,
I feel like that all started, there's big shifts all over the world and all over time, but it felt to me, and reading that book, it kind of reinforced the feeling that this shift from unicorns to camels started with WeWork. You know, when people said that's a lot of money to lose. A lot of people lost a lot of money when WeWork's valuation went down as steeply and as quickly as it did, and I think that maybe jostled Silicon Valley a little bit into focusing less on growth at all cost, and more on trying to make something sustainable.
yeah, for sure. Like all that money that was floating around and the crazy valuations that some of these
Yeah,
companies, were getting, and obviously we work at the end of the day was just real estate, whatever
absolutely.
sort
Yeah.
of company you want to talk about. But then you had like fair enough, uh, you
Oh
know,
yeah. Oh,
yeah,
that,
like that's when stuff gets really serious, really
yeah.
dangerous, really quickly because it's not a little tech company or a real
Oh my
estate
goodness.
company
Yeah.
that's
The stakes
faking
are
to be.
higher. Yeah.
Yes, it's actual, life and death. I remember, I watched the TV show, read the Bad Blood as well a couple of
Oh
times,
yeah.
the books.
Great book. Uh huh.
Yeah, but yeah, I remember reading about people that were getting, false,
Oh my gosh. Can you
cancer,
imagine that? Yeah.
yeah, results, or like good or bad. Like they was saying everything was fine, even though it wasn't, or they were saying it's not fine, and then they was undergoing treatment as a result of it, even though they're fine.
Oh my goodness. Exactly. There's an ethos in tech, and I think it's maybe a Silicon Valley saying of move fast, break things. You
Yes,
know, or move fast, break shit. If I'm okay to allowed to say shit.
yes, fine,
Uh,
go for it.
so that, and you know what? That's not a huge deal if the shit that you're breaking is a social media app that you're using to post pictures of yourself. You know,
Yeah,
stakes are low. Great, move fast. You know, but yeah, there's no question that there should be more rigor when you're looking at things like people's health. You know,
from the
uh,
start, yeah,
oh
there
my
should be
goodness.
yes.
Exactly. It's the same. So the company that I work for now, we work with the law, you know, and I am very aware that if I build something, or the team releases something that doesn't work or doesn't work the way it's supposed to, that's a really different thing than, when I was working at team. When I was at team and we would mess up, the very worst thing that could happen was somebody could double book a conference room, and it could be bad. It could be a board meeting or something. Like, like we used to talk about the stakes all the time. That was a big part of building the value prop, telling someone, oh man, wouldn't it be terrible if you had a board meeting and then people
Yeah.
just walked in the meeting middle of it. But that is the worst possible thing that could happen if something went wrong at team. It's interesting when you have higher stakes. When you've got a health tech is important. I think it's great. I think it's a really good thing. The problems facing humanity when it comes to access to health are so big that we need to disrupt it. I think telehealth is amazing. Telehealth is such an incredible, new thing that's so available now and wasn't available almost at all 10 years ago, or is really difficult to find. And in the law, it's the same kind of thing, I feel like. The problems with access to justice are so bad just in the United States. It's something like 50 million people have unmet legal needs. We need to disrupt it, but at the same time, um, if, if one of the things we work with is immigration. If somebody submits a bad asylum application, and USCIS in the United States, they're in charge of immigration. If they say this is a frivolous asylum claim, that person can never apply for any immigration status in the United States.
Mm,
So it's like that's much higher stakes than somebody double booking their conference room.
of
And
course.
it shouldn't put us off of it. It's really important that people try to solve complicated problems and high stakes problems. If Theranos worked, it would have been life. It would have changed the world. It would have been great, but it didn't work. And people need to. I feel like, of course, Sunny Balwani and Elizabeth Holmes. Those are the people responsible, but also all those board members, all those investors, all those people who skipped the due diligence steps, who
Mm.
just took a founder's word for it. Those people have responsibility as well. And I think it's something we need to see change in the entire culture of tech, is more people holding each other accountable, not to be difficult, but because especially when the stakes are high, especially when the outcome from from bad tech, from something not working like it's supposed to, when the outcome is so severe as it was with Theranos and as it can be with things like the law and health.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And yeah, like you're saying, the people need to be held accountable, especially obviously, you have Elizabeth, Sonny Balwani, like you're saying, but the people that invested in them, like you said, they could have looked into it more. I bet you a few of them knew enough that they, or suspected enough
Yeah,
that they thought something's not right, but because it was all ticking, for them financially or reputation, was like something, whatever their, way of measuring success was, because he was ticking in the right direction for them.
exactly.
Because there's so many board members and so many investors. If there's one, it's different. But if there's like 10, 20
Yeah,
plus, you could easily say, oh, I didn't know it was my responsibility, or that's not my field of expertise. I'm not a scientist. I don't
yeah.
know.
Oh,
uh,
absolutely.
they can
Yeah,
just pass it on to the next investor, and then obviously that person's going to say the same thing, and then nothing gets done because the reality is the law's not going to put in prison 20 different billionaires or presidents, because they had
yeah.
ex-presidents
Oh,
and
exactly.
whatnot, and politicians and whoever else that invested and endorsed it. They're not going to put them in jail or put them even on stand to talk about it when they're just acting dumb anyway about it.
Yeah,
And
wasn't I think like Henry Kissinger was on the board of
yeah, and was
directors,
it
and
Hillary Clinton, or she had some involvement with it, and Bill
maybe,
Clinton as
yeah.
well?
Maybe I wouldn't be surprised. I know for sure it was Henry Kissinger, and then some other somebody who was maybe James Mattis or somebody in the Defense Department world. It was like a State Department world, Defense Department world, tons of luminaries, and
Mm,
and it felt you know it felt like this appeal to authority, basically, of Theranos saying, "Look at all these people. If they trust us, why don't you?"
yeah,
And that's I think that's a problem that you see across not just tech, across all kinds of companies.
yeah,
But
for sure.
I feel like everything gets a little bit dialed up in tech because the valuations are so high. A company can have a value 10 or 20 or 30 times more than its revenue, and that's when you have that kind of money on the table, and so if your valuation could be 30 times what your revenue is, that means dialing up your revenue 1% can give you a 30% increase, in your valuation. And all these people, with their equity are thinking, let's let's dial it up, let's not lie, but let's exaggerate. Let's not, steal, but let's bend the rules. And that's something we've seen in these big, spectacular examples, of companies who have who have seen their valuations, just take a plunge. But I feel like it's something that happens all throughout business, obviously, but especially in tech, because of all the money in tech and the fact that nobody understands it. That I think one of the wacky things about Theranos, and a problem that you see all over the place, is tech. We're getting to a point where our ability to understand tech is far outpaced by our ability to create it. The people who are starting these companies, and the engineers building these tools, they understand this stuff, but then they're kind of distilling it down for their pitches to funders, and the funders are operating based on a rudimentary understanding of a rudimentary explanation of something really complicated. And I don't know what the solution is for that. You can't expect a whole bunch uh, of of VCs who are, maybe getting a little bit older, to understand the intricacies of the very latest cutting edge technology. But it is a problem, and I think that as AI, um, becomes more prevalent, we're going to see even more, the exaggerations of what things can do, and investors and board members and stuff just getting caught up in the hype, and not trying to do anything cynical, not trying to be not trying to do anything wrong, just legitimately in over their heads, and no idea that they don't understand something. Because if you're someone who's been in Silicon Valley for 20 years, and you've been picking winners pretty regularly for 20 years, you might think, I just have a knack for this, I get it, nobody can pull a fast one on me. And a lot of
Yes.
people have had a fast one pulled on them over the last decade or so, because the tech is just getting to a point where it's difficult for people to wrap their heads around, even people who have been in Silicon Valley for decades. And I don't know what the solution is there. I think part of it is maybe just moving a little more slowly. And that's not something that Silicon Valley wants to hear. That's not something VCs want to hear. That's not something owners and founders want to
Yeah.
hear. But
I
I
think
think it might be.
customers as well don't want to hear
Oh,
that either.
definitely. Yeah. Absolutely. Customers want newer, faster, better all the time. And the push is accelerate, accelerate, accelerate. And I think most of the time, there are a lot of things we should be accelerating on, uh, but maybe we do need to. Maybe we would be served by pumping the brakes a little bit, just gathering information about our surroundings. Move slowly enough that we can see what's over the horizon. Because it feels a lot like, I remember one time I rented a dune buggy, and we've got these sand dunes down a couple hours south of me in Utah. And the first thing the guy said was, "Don't ever go over a dune without if you don't know what's on the other side of it." And I thought, of course, that makes perfect sense. And the very first thing that I did was I got up a bunch of speed, went up a dune, and then and it was really steep on the other side, and I almost got myself into a lot of trouble. um you know it survived, was fine. But I feel like that's this entire industry. It's like, no, we're just racing over these sand dunes without any idea what's on the other side. And if we slow down from time to time to take a peek and orient ourselves and look around, I feel like we could probably avoid some of these catastrophic things that happen. But that's not how we're built. We're built to move fast, 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 more, 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 growth at all costs.
Yeah, I think like one potential solution could be not necessarily slowing things down, but when let's say a company gets to certain levels, size, they have to be more transparent, whether it's with the investors or whether it's with public, but at least with investors and other, shareholders and board members, and even with their employees potentially, and break stuff down because the way when you become a publicly traded company, you
Oh
have to
yeah,
release a lot of financial data, whereas you don't when you're private. I think you should get to a point where if you're X valuation, you have to,
yeah,
provide something. I mean, have some, leniency how you provide it, but something that explains maybe the tech or the business model, or something a bit easier to understand. And let's say when
yeah,
you get to 100 million, when you get to a billion, 10 billion, and that way people are like, okay, if we're gonna raise all this money and take a jump from 100 mil to a bill, there's gonna be certain things that we are gonna have to provide, otherwise it's gonna be considered illegal.
oh yeah,
Again, it doesn't have to be to the public, because you're not getting money from the public, you're getting it from private investors. That's fair enough, but have some sort of metric, and then obviously the question is who goes over this
yeah,
to determine it. Obviously the obvious one is some sort of government body. People don't want to hear that, but
yeah,
but that is the obvious one, or some sort of organization, ideally not with board members or people that run these other tech companies or these other companies. It can't be formed by them, because they'll just can just all be in on it together and say everything's fine,
yeah, yeah,
just to benefit each other. But some sort of metric to say, okay, you've reached $1 billion valuation, or $1 billion in revenue, or whatever it is, and or X amount of customers, because obviously customers and users are a big part of companies these days. It could be once you reach 100 million users, at that point you realistically should be providing this and this and this information to your customers, to your employees, to your board members, to your shareholders, and only then you could go to the 500 million mark. Obviously, it's a bit awkward with that, because you might just get more members without you doing anything, but I think that's maybe some possibility of how to tackle it.
yeah. I feel like it would be great if it was the industry, holding itself accountable, or the to me the people who makes the most sense are the funders. The reason
Yeah.
why you have to disclose to the public, like you were saying, when you go public, is because the public is now funding it. So you would think that, okay, well, if a company is going to raise $100 million or $1 billion, that these funders, that they would take the responsibility for, okay, you got to open up your books to us a little bit. But the problem is that there's so much competition
Mm,
among the funders, that they don't want to miss the next unicorn, so they'll just
no.
say whatever, I believe you, and I feel like that's what's slowing down. Right now you are kind of seeing funders who want to know more. They want to peek a little bit more. And I think this was I believe something that was, it was either mentioned in Bad Blood or Cult of We. Uh, this used to be a natural function in a company's size. A company could only get to a certain size most of the time before going public. You would raise a certain amount of money, then you would become profitable. Profitability was sort of a good way of knowing, well, it can't all be bad. You've got to have your ducks in a row if you're making a profit. And at that point, you go public. And when you go public, you've got to open your books to the SEC. You got to file your S1, and you're being the most forthright and transparent that this company's ever been. But these days, because it just, there didn't used to be an appetite to privately fund a business that wasn't profitable past $1 billion or a $10 billion valuation. But now you've got a lot of companies who fit that description. They're not profitable. They're valued at tens of billions of dollars, and they're still privately held. And I have nothing against privately held companies, but it does mean if you're privately held and you're not disclosing to the public, and which is the main way that at least in the U.S. Um, that we have some control over the amount of transparency that a company is putting out there. That's out the window. That's not available if the culture and the money situation is such that people can just, a company can just stay private forever. So what replaces it? And so far it's been nothing. So far there hasn't been, at least to my knowledge, anything big and formal saying, okay, like what you're describing, when a company reaches this valuation, all of us tech funders, all of us VCs, we're all going to agree that they need to disclose this, and this, and we need to have these kinds of benchmarks or metrics in order, for them to continue to be funded. And but the problem is the incentives are all, they're not there. The incentives are the exact opposite. The incentives are, we're going to pit these VCs against each other for the right to fund us because we're going to make a big return eventually. And it seems like, for the last several months, maybe a year, maybe since WeWork, there's been a little bit more hesitation on the part of VCs to blindly throw money into something without understanding it. It seems like there's a little bit more of an appetite for, for doing your due diligence. I don't think it's where it needs to be yet, but at least from my perspective, the company I'm at right now, we're not VC funded, so I haven't been in that world for a little bit. I've got friends who are at companies who are VC funded. I kind of, hear from them what the environment is like, but it feels a little bit like companies or like VCs are being a tiny, tiny bit more careful, and that they do want to have a better, more insight into a company's finances and operations.
Yeah, definitely. Having more transparency is not a bad thing. Obviously, you
Yeah.
gotta get that balance. I feel like we'll probably go too far one way
Yeah.
and maybe hinder some of the companies and maybe deter some people, and then we'll probably find some sort of middle ground and find some way that they can be transparent without it being too much hassle for them, and they don't mind doing it, or even gives them some incentive, potentially, so for the good companies, really,
Yeah.
companies with a solid foundation, it's almost like a stamp of approval, and then investors or outsiders are like, damn, like, that one,
Yeah.
got past the, the review, or like, whatever,
That's interesting. Yeah.
board it is, or whatever thing they're revealing, and they're doing really well, or they got a solid, business model. Let's actually look into it a little further. So I
That's
mean,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, I
There.
mean, they could even carry on.
Oh, and I was just going to say that is it's interesting because there are designations for certain kinds of companies. You can be a
Mm,
public benefit corporation,
yeah,
and you have, your tax status is B
exactly.
Corp, and you're certified as a B Corp in the same way that you'd be certified, like, SOC 2 type 1 compliant. Like, it's auditors who run you through this audit and then give you this certification. So, the foundation to do something like that is already there. It would be interesting if, companies started saying there's like a SOC 2, for your information security certification. Then there's some other kind of thing for your like financial stability or something. I think B Corps, right now, being a B Corp isn't super popular. I only know a handful of companies, off the top of my head, that are public benefit corporations. But that could become a thing where, because to be a B Corp, you do need to take some of these steps that could lead, I think, to maybe slower but more sustainable growth at a company. Things like, taking really good care of your employees, and being a good place to work. And so that maybe B Corp becomes that. Maybe, being a B Corp in 5 or 10 years is also shorthand for, this is a company that's a tightly well-run ship. And because right now I think some people see a B Corp as maybe a risky investment because it's a company that's not focused 100% on profitability, um, and growth. But that could become something that becomes attractive to VCs in the coming years if it gets too volatile, where they go, well, we can trust these public benefit corporations, to stick around because they, part of their whole thing is building a solid foundation.
Yeah, I mean, like, one of the things I was just thinking they could be, because they, let's say you have a company, it has solid foundation, solid business model, good steady growth. Maybe it's nothing crazy that VCs are generally attracted to, but they're just a business that they know will probably be here in 10 years. and be bigger, but it won't may not go 100 times, might just go
Yeah.
5 times, and maybe those sort of companies could get certain stamp of approval. They could go into some sort of pool, and at the end of the year or at the end of whatever investing period these investors have, maybe they got 100 mil left, and they need to dump that cash quickly, and they can't. They don't have time to do due diligence in some of these high flying companies, and for tax purposes, they need to get rid. Maybe they can like dip into that pool and say, okay,
Yeah.
there's a bunch of companies here. There's due diligence already done on these. They're looking like solid companies. They're not going to get us crazy returns, but we'll know this 100 million probably be worth 2-3 in a few years, and we're fine with that. I mean, it could serve that purpose because I know there's plenty of companies out there where they've been around for 10 years and they haven't had some crazy growth, and they may want it but they just haven't, but they're growing, like they every
Yeah.
year they are getting a bit stronger, a bit better, they're making a bit more money and they're making more contacts and doing this and that, and in 10 years they're going to be even better than that. And I think there's a lot of companies like that investors just miss out on, and
Yeah.
it's not about investing in them instead of Google. It's about, okay, we've got the Googles, we've got a bit of spare cash, or even if it's as a matter of like a goodwill gesture, publicly speaking, saying, we're investing in these, maybe this family run business or this other business where it's not a tech or it's not something crazy high flying growing, and we're just going to help them, grow a bit more. It's not about them going from 1 million to 100 million. It's about going from 1 to 10 over a 10-year
Yeah.
period.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, yeah, I
That's
think there's a
interesting.
lot that can be done there.
Yeah, I like that. That's an interesting idea. And B Corps, part of their certification is that they do have to disclose. They need to exhibit some kind of transparency. They disclose some information about their performance that the certifying organization, I forget what the certifying organization is called, but they measure those results against some benchmarks. So it's definitely, as far as I know, the closest thing, for private industries to the kind of rigor that you see in a or for private companies to the kind of rigor that you see for public companies. And it'd be neat. I would love to see, some more incentives for companies to become public benefit corporations, because I think it's a good trend. I think it's healthy for the consumers, for the workforce, and generally for technology. I want to see a bunch of tech companies become B Corps, because it seems like a way not only to do good, but to have a more sustainability and less of these wild ups and downs that we see in tech. Part of what we love about tech are the wild ups and downs. I don't want to get rid of them, but if it were less insane, at its most insane, I think that'd be a good thing for everybody.
Oh, yeah, for sure, definitely. But yeah, it's one of those things, people are going to have to talk about it and try and figure stuff out. And it'll be need a bunch of experimentation to kind of curb the experimentation and the craziness that goes on in tech. They're going to need a bit of that experimentation to try and figure out what works best for everyone.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So, whilst you were at WeWork, what, if any, crazy techniques and tips did you, learn from WeWork that you could give to others to succeed? If there's anything that you saw or that you heard about.
That's a good question. Let's see. I think some of the one of the best things that I learned at WeWork, one of my favorite things that I learned. I forget who said it. It was somebody at that summit, that big party in Los Angeles, um, gave a gave a presentation about the platinum rule. And the golden rule. I think everybody's familiar with the golden rule of treat other people like you want to be treated.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of the platinum rule that this presenter, who's an executive at WeWork, that she went through. The platinum rule is you treat other people how they want to be treated. You know, Treating people how you want to be treated only works if you're dealing with people who are like you and who want to be treated the way that you want. And I get what the saying means. It just means be nice to people. But in business, you have so many opportunities to customize the way that you treat people. Whether It's how you respond to emails, or how you run a meeting, or how you negotiate a contract renewal. There's so many opportunities to create a good experience for somebody that doesn't cost you anything other than paying attention, asking questions, learning what they like, how they prefer to do business, and adapting and doing business the way that they want to. So that was something that I definitely have brought with me to 650, to everything that I've done since WeWork. Was rather than say I have this great method, I've come up with this phenomenal way of doing X. I've got this great way of doing. When I was in account management, is all about quarterly business reviews. I've got this phenomenal process for quarterly business reviews where the customer's happy and I grow the account, and so I'm happy and my boss is happy. Um, and so I'm going to stick to it. This is a solid gold, process. And I decided I'm going to try changing it up, and I'm going to find out, for all of my customers, I'm going to figure out how they like to do these business reviews. What would they change? Uh, you know, let them have a little bit more input, let them drive a little bit more. I was in such control of those interactions, that they went exactly how I wanted them to go, but they didn't necessarily go how the other person wanted them to go. And so I made a habit of that, of really taking the time to get to know what my customers, what my partners wanted out of these interactions, and then tailoring something like a something as big as a quarterly business review, or a visit to their office, or something as small as whether they prefer a call or an email. And then just sticking to it. I think overall that is the main thing I learned. The main thing I learned was this idea of the platinum rule. But then I also learned a lot of smaller things. Some of them are great things. I had some phenomenal bosses, Melinda Gonzalez and Carter Weigel, who had come from Salesforce and all these giants, and I got to watch them and be mentored by them and learn some of their practices. Um, but I think the biggest thing was just that idea of treat people how they want to be treated, which means you've got to take the time to learn how people want to be treated, and that has benefited me enormously, and it's benefited, I think, all everybody I do business with as well.
Hello.
Oh, can you hear me still?
Yeah, I can still hear you. I was just listening.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. So let's see. So aside from that platinum rule, um, some things that I learned at WeWork were, I think, the importance of everybody rowing in the same direction. I there was I feel like there was a lot of momentum at team right before the WeWork acquisition, and the WeWork acquisition changed nothing except because really they were very hands off, and we appreciated that. Um, it changed nothing right away except that there was somebody telling us what to do. It's kind of saying here's what the goals are now, and when goals were aligned, when everybody understood what we were trying to get out of it, it's something that seems so um, ephemeral, or so abstract, the concept of everybody knows what the goal is. When that was the case, when everybody knew what the goal was, uh, there was just momentum. It was so easy to build momentum, and there were definitely times where leadership would change, and so goals would change and strategies would change, and it felt like you'd spin your wheels for 3 months in a row. You were working just as hard, and everybody was just as smart as they were the week before. But when you change priorities like that, which happened a couple times, I don't think through any fault of anybody. That's just the nature of a company the size of WeWork buying a company the size of Team. Was there were several different people who were in charge, and over the course of about a year and a half, they had different ideas of what success looked like. They had different ideas of what the value of team was to WeWork. And every time that changed, it was, all this momentum you'd built up just kind of got fizzled out, and you have to start over. And that's, I think, just it's an inevitability. It's going to happen. but I didn't really have an appreciation for how important, you know, um, consistent leadership can be. Just it's not about the quality. I always thought of a good leader as just, an inspiring person or a hard worker or someone who's really smart. And those are all true. But this other thing of like a good leader is really good at getting everybody on the same page and pointed in the same direction. That is something I didn't really appreciate until WeWork, because there were times where there was great leadership and I could see, and feel that. And then there were times where there was leadership that was, that was more meandering, or not as decisive, and you could feel the difference palpably.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely having someone that's steering the ship
Yeah.
and knows that, okay, we're gonna go this way, and that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So right now you work for 650. What's
Yeah.
your role over there?
So at 650, I've got a great job at 650. I'm in charge of pro bono and social impact. So we build, on the business side of the company, the side that makes money, we build tools. We automate legal processes, mostly legal documents, to help businesses solve legal problems in a more affordable, accessible, streamlined way than how they can do it right now, or how they've been doing it before. And that's stuff around like employment law, privacy law, business and commercial, contracts, that kind of thing. On my side of the business, we try to do the same kind of thing, but for regular people, for people who can't afford an attorney, and their problems are really different. They're quite varied, and we try to focus on the ones that have the biggest impact to them, where we can offer the most help. So we help people most, like the places where we have the biggest impact are landlord tenant, helping people avoid getting evicted, debt, replying to a debt collector and helping to manage debt, and then around, kind of a myriad of legal processes that are really complex, and can be streamlined quite a bit by technology. The process of changing your name or correcting your gender marker, or getting a protective order, or creating a will. These are all things where um, the the legal processes are there, but they're so and a lot of times they're not even that expensive. It doesn't cost very much to get a will. You just have to have a notary sign it, but you have to. It's so complicated, and the stakes are so high, because it's a law, that most people feel intimidated by it. And so my job has been, how do we make people feel empowered by the law instead of intimidated by it? How do we change the way people feel about the law to something that belongs to them, something that they can use to make their lives better, rather than some big scary thing that's usually out to make their lives worse? In a nutshell, I'd say that's what I do. My title is VP of Pro Bono and Social Impact.
Okay. What attracted you to pro bono instead of doing that sort of work for, let's say, a tech company, like a big tech company?
Yeah, really good question. So I guess in a nutshell, I have, in my own life, I've experienced how different the law is for somebody who's rich and powerful and like a normal person. I was born like outside of what you'd call the law. I was, my parents were, kind of anti-government folks, and I was born in like our neighbor's house in this middle of nowhere town called Cane Beds, Arizona. I was born at the neighbor's house because our house had like a dirt floor and no water. We'd moved out there so my dad could write his 1,000-page anti-government manifesto. It was like, kind of a weird little house in the prairie kind of life. And
Did he ever get published? Out of curiosity,
I
I
don't
wouldn't
think
mind a
so.
read.
No,
No.
it's on the internet, but no, I don't think anybody wanted to touch it. But I mean, brilliant guy. My dad, spoke 10 languages fluently. Was a really brilliant person.
I'll get the link to that afterwards.
Yeah, I'll send it to you
I'll
for
have a
sure.
read.
But so we were living out in the middle of nowhere, Cane Beds, Arizona. My parents didn't report my birth to the state, so I didn't have a birth certificate or a social security number. I was homeschooled. We didn't go to the doctor, and so when I was a teenager, I was like, I want to be part of society. I want to go to school. I want to get a driver's license. it was really, really difficult. Going to school was
Yeah.
pretty hard. My mom, you know, spent a lot of time trying to get us registered for public school.
How did
But
you find out about that stuff? Like the regular teenage stuff, school stuff. Did you have TV that you found out? Like, how did you know?
oh yeah, so we moved around a lot. So I was born in middle of nowhere, but we moved to like I lived in Portland for a little bit.
So
We
you saw
lived on Salt Lake.
society. You
Exactly. Yeah. So
saw, yeah.
I didn't go to school, but I'd go to church.
Okay.
And at church, I'd talk to friends, and one kid was like, "I can't believe your name is Ransom." That's when they kidnap a kid. I was like, "Are you kidding me?" I had no idea. I was so mad about that, and I would find out these things about history that I'd never heard,
Yeah.
or whatever, and I thought, I really want to be part of society, And then for driving, I think honestly, if I'm being real, it was more that's how you go on dates. No girl's going to go on a date with a guy who can't drive, and I'm 15 at this point, and I really want to take driver's ed. I want girls to like me. I want to be able to go on dates, and so I needed to be able to drive and have a car, and that meant all this stuff. To get a driver's license, I had to have a birth certificate, like a real birth certificate. My parents had written down my name and my weight in our family Bible, and that was like what they called my birth certificate until I was like 17. I had to get a real birth certificate. I had to get, a social security number, which my dad was very against. He called social security numbers the mark of the beast, so that was an argument I had to win. But
How did
then
you win it?
my mom won it for me.
Oh.
I was not a good enough. I wasn't persuasive enough. He would say stuff like, "Yeah." So my dad was an inventor. He was confident that his invention would one day make so much money. Every time I talked about driving, he would say, "You're gonna have limousines drive you everywhere one day. You don't need to worry." I'm like, "Dad, I want to go on a date. I want to take a girl to prom."
You want to go
Well,
now?
yeah, it's like, well, you could one day you'll be able to afford a limousine. I don't care about one day. I care about right now, and right now I want a driver's license. So my mom, she took my side, and she is the one who did all this work too. She spent years. It took her, I think, 2 years to get my birth certificate because every form she'd fill out, it was like, you need to have a doctor's, visit note. You need to have school records. You need to have immunization records. I'd never gotten my immunizations until pretty recently. So all of these things that she had to overcome, I was seeing it as a kid. I couldn't really appreciate how much work it was, but I appreciated when it was done. I had my driver's license, and I was really happy about it. Then about a decade ago, it was about 2015, I want to say, I needed to get a passport. And, getting a passport is way harder than getting a birth certificate, it turns out. I was really worried about it. I was in this band, and we had won a bunch of these contests. We were doing really well. And if we won one more round of this contest for hard rock, they were going to fly us to Spain, and we'd play this big music festival. And we thought, this is it. This is going to be our big break. And we were doing well in the contest, so we thought we might win. And everybody had a passport except for me. And I was so stressed out that I was not going to be able to get a passport because it was I remember it had taken years for my mom to get my birth certificate, and I only had, I think, 6 weeks between when we found out, about this, like when this was and when we were going to find out when the winner was going to be announced, basically, when I would need to have my passport. I'd need to show them my passport on the day they announced the winner, or we wouldn't be able to go. So I was just, stressed out to the max. I filled out papers. I wrote letters. I did absolutely everything you're supposed to do. And I just kept on hearing back over and over again, you've got to have a school record. You've got to have a doctor, some kind of medical record. If you don't have a birth certificate, you need, this certificate or this certificate. And it was all these things that didn't apply to me, that didn't work for me. And because I'd been born at home in the middle of nowhere, and nobody knew I existed for so many years. So finally, I got a letter back from the State Department. This was, a few weeks before the deadline, and I'm just so stressed out. And they sent me a letter, and they said, "You've run out of options. You are never, if you can't give us either, a medical record or an educational record, you'll never get a birth certificate, or you'll never get a passport." And it was so devastating to me because it meant not only can I not go, to do this, I'm going to let my whole band down if we win this contest, but it also meant that I could never travel, and I'd always sort of imagined myself one day figuring all this out, and getting to see the world a little bit. So I was really sad. I was telling my friends, kind of breaking the news to them, and then one of the guys in the band, his friend had worked for a congressman, and his name was Rob, and the congressman is Jim Matheson. And he said, when I worked for Congressman Matheson, one of the things that his office did was help people with passports. So maybe try talking to a congressman. And on one hand, I was kind of excited because I thought, oh, great, I've got an option. But on the other hand, I was pissed because I was like, how come in all my looking and all my searching and all my frantic phone calls and desperate emails and letters, nobody said talk to your congressman. So I did. My congressional representative is named Chris Stewart. I went to his website, filled out a form. A couple people from his office got in touch with me. They sent me another form. I'd filled out so many forms by this time. They sent me another form, and it just said, do you give us permission to access your records on your behalf? And I said, I'm thinking to myself, my records are garbage, so good luck, but I signed it. And a couple of days later, they said that my passport application had been approved. And then, I had it expedited, and I think I had it just a few days after that. So we're talking like 5 to 7 days to solve this problem that I've been working on for months. And sorry, this is all the story is me saying kind of why I wanted to get into pro bono and access to justice, because here I am, I was in 20 something years old, no idea how anything works, just trying to pursue my dream, just trying to pursue my passion, and can get nowhere. And then and spent months and stressed out and so worried. And then with the exact same information, I just signed a thing and said, this congressman's staff had the same access to my records that I, ostensibly already had, but my same access, my same records, I could get nothing. They got a passport for me. And I thought, well, what's the difference? Why, I expect a congressman to have more access to like the nuclear codes than I do. I expect a congressman to know more about our national security than me, but like, to get my own passport, how come it's so much easier for a powerful person with the right access and knowledge and power to do something when it comes to the law than it is for me? And that was around the time that my band didn't win the contest, by the way, but that was around the time that I decided I wanted to uh, make music less of a career and more of a hobby. And I decided to get into tech. And from the start, I didn't know how I wanted to do it, but I knew I wanted to work in making stuff more accessible. I knew that I wanted to do something, I wanted to have some kind of impact. And I didn't think that I'd find a company I could work for that I could actually do exactly that. And so that when WeWork sold Team, I was looking at a lot of different options of where to work next. A lot of the great people I worked with at WeWork had already found new opportunities, and so I had a few good options, of working with people that I already knew I loved working with. And there were, some really solid options, but one of them was this company 650. And the deciding thing for me was that 650, they, from the start, they said, okay, so we do two things. We do commercial stuff to make money, and then we also do free tools for people who can't afford legal help. And at the time, it was just one thing. It was just a thing called Hello Landlord. And I thought, that's really neat. I love this. I want to be involved with it. And from the very start, when I joined that company, um, one of my first projects was trying to get the word out about these pro bono tools. Even before that was my job, I would take that on as like a task. So I did that for years. I ran our marketing. I did sales. I did sales development. I did public relations. But the whole time, I was also working on these pro bono tools. So then, when we hired a chief marketing officer to take over our marketing, um, I had a choice. They said, do you want to do something, around this kind of stuff or this kind of thing? And I said, I want to run our pro bono. I want to only do pro bono. I want to only be held responsible for how good our pro bono tools are, how many of them we build, how many people use them. That's what I want to be measured by, and that's the job I want. And they agreed. And so that was just about a year ago now. It was December of 2021 that I took over our pro bono team. And that's a very, very, very long answer to a short question. But that's, I guess in short, the answer is I believe that the law is for everybody, that the law is like public parks and libraries. It's something that is ours and it isn't just for powerful people. And I want to take steps that make that reality. Because right now, the reality is powerful, rich people have a very different experience with the law than normal people. I want to change that. I think that's, the short answer. And then the longer one is it's been my favorite part of 650 from the very start. And I feel very honored that I get to run that part now.
Oh yeah, like, I mean, it's very interesting that you was talking about how there's just a lot of information that people just don't have. I think there's a lot of
Absolutely.
things, legal definitely, but other stuff as well that just need to be taught in schools.
Oh my
Like
gosh. Yeah.
I don't know of any school, and if there is probably be the odd one where if you don't choose, law to study, that they sit there and teach you about the law. Obviously, you're not going to know everything, and that's not the purpose, but just to know some basics. And then with that, talk about tax, talk about mortgages,
Yeah. Oh
talk
yeah.
about, how, you can benefit from it, how you can, and, the law in other countries. And then, like, when you're growing up, you can say, okay, maybe the law in this country is not for me. Maybe I want to go into somewhere else, or maybe this or that. And it's just so much of it that's just people. It's just obscure. People don't know.
Yeah.
It's also knowing how to navigate through the law, especially when it's not necessarily set up to protect you. So knowing that, okay, I've got to maybe act in a certain way, because you have to, because everyone's heard of, you have the right to remain silent.
Yeah.
Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to attorney. If you can afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. I've literally just Googled that because I couldn't remember the
That's
exactly,
good.
but
That's pretty. Yeah. You nailed it.
yeah, but everyone always hears that. And I remember I was watching a video, I think it was a lecture or something with a lawyer, and he was saying, pay close attention to what they're saying. They're saying anything you say can and will be used
Yeah.
against you. It's
Yeah.
not used against or for you,
Yeah.
it's directly saying
Yeah.
against you. And and I remember
Yeah.
thinking, like all the time, I'm pretty sure I used to just think that it could just be used, in a court of
Yeah.
law.
Yeah.
And when he broke it down, I was like, "Now let me have a Google." Just in case he's, just some BS, stupid, YouTube stuff. Then I Googled it. I was like, "It literally will be used against you or can be," and there's nothing about it being in favor of you. And then there's just like a bunch of other stuff, just knowing that. And I think it's also important to teach kids when they get older how to interact with police if they ever have to,
Yeah.
if they're in certain circumstances. And I know people that are close to me that will say, oh, but you shouldn't have to. And it's like, yeah, you shouldn't have to, but the reality is we live in a world where
Yeah.
a scenario can come up, and if you're male or female, you will have to approach it in a different way. If you're black or white or Asian, you're gonna have to approach it in a certain different way. If you're in a certain different country, you're gonna have to approach it in a certain different way. Like, how do you navigate that? And I find it's easy stuff if you know how, and
Yeah.
how
Oh, definitely.
how to deal with it, like, and making sure. And one of the obvious things is keeping a level head, not getting angry. And also, I remember a cousin of mine, he got stopped for speeding from
Yeah.
the police, and then the police came up to him, like stopped him, and they said, do you know you was going past the speed limit, like what you was going at? And my obviously not saying they should necessarily teach stuff like this, but it's kind of a hack. He literally said to them, he just acted dumb. He just says, no, I don't know what speed I was going. Like, no, 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 not that. Like, he said something like, not that I'm aware of. Like, the cop, he realized the cop didn't have proof outside of
Yeah.
him knowing. He didn't have it like recorded. So
Yeah.
unless he admitted to it,
Yeah.
then they couldn't do anything. And he just acted dumb. And basically, the cop basically got pissed and said, go home, go.
Yeah.
Uh, but that could be used for something positive to tell people that okay, I see all the time people giving more
Yeah.
information out than they need to, and it's not just from legal perspective. I see them giving it to just friends and family,
Yeah.
and then it just ends up being, effectively, shit on their face when something
Yeah.
doesn't happen the way they've said, or something goes wrong, and then the person like, oh, you said this, instead of that person being like, okay, things happen. So I like the thing I always say to my wife is say the bare minimum. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
if you're telling someone that you can't attend for something, like give them like give
Can't
bare
make it. Yeah.
yeah, give bare minimum, because as soon as you start going into
Yeah.
details, one, you're setting up yourself up for things going wrong. Two,
Yeah.
you've got to remember the details you've given, even if they're legit. You're
Yeah.
like it's most of the time you find people won't even ask. The they'll just leave you at that, and then they'll just think, okay, maybe it was something serious. But if you give them the details, then they might be like, okay, I don't think that's serious. Like, so yeah, I think that's another thing that people need to be told, like how to navigate the law,
Yeah.
what the law is, and how to interact with people.
Yeah, I think that you touched on kind of two really important aspects of how people experience the law, which is one, how good is the law for them,
Yes.
and then two, how do they interact with it? And
Mm.
I I want to be part of an organization that something I love about 650 is that it is an organization that tries to push on both on both fronts. So with like changing your name or correcting your gender marker in the state of Utah, the process to do it is really complicated, and some of that is because the law behind it is really complicated. Some of it is because the court like policies and rules around it are complicated, and some of it is that the actual process of the paperwork that you fill out, the going to a hearing, that's complicated. And you kind of break those into two camps. It's like what's the stuff that we can control, or the stuff that we can where the rubber hits the road, and that's like the paperwork. So we try to automate the paperwork, make the paperwork easier, and take the guesswork out of the paperwork. But also, we uh, we worked with some organizations here in Utah to try to change the rules, and we did. We changed some of the rules around name and gender marker changes in Utah, and because you were saying earlier, like people need to learn how to talk to the police. And some people will say they shouldn't have to learn how to talk to the police. The police should just be a better experience. And I think that both are true. I think that we have to, we got to prepare and learn and get ready for the world that we have, and with the tools we have, with the rules we have, with the laws we have, we've got to help people do the best for themselves they can in that scenario. But at the same time, that helps us identify where it can be better. If you're helping people, if people understand their rights and they understand the law, like down to the rubber meets the road, what would you do? What paperwork would you fill out to get an order of protection? Then they can say, well, hold on, this part doesn't make sense to me. Or why is this like that? That seems unfair. The more that people understand, how to participate with the law right now, the better they're able to identify, oh, well, we should change the rules. We should, a police officer shouldn't be able to pull you over unless they know that you are speeding, if in that scenario where someone's pulled over, the police officer doesn't have evidence that they're speeding, and you say, hey, don't tell them how fast you were going because they might not know. That's a good thing for them to know. But then it also surfaces this kind of strange thing. I think most people would assume that you could only get pulled over if the police know that you did something wrong, but that isn't the case.
No.
So it kind of, if
I
you
could prove
empower
it. Like
people,
they might not be able
yeah,
to. They might know, but if they
yeah,
can't prove it, then it's neither here nor there.
yeah. So like I think if you can empower people to understand the current process and how to navigate the current process, you help them in the short term, and you also identify, fixes to make things better in the long term. You identify, okay, so here's this little like trick kind of for navigating a police stop that might uncover questions. People say, well, I shouldn't have to remember this. The police just shouldn't pull me over unless they can tell me that what I was doing wrong. And then you can have that conversation. Then you can have that policy conversation, and you can talk to the city council and the state legislature, and you can try to make changes. I feel like that's it. The things move so. Part of the problem with the law is that it can change too frequently or not frequently at all, and it can be really hard to know what it is. Even if we had a whole class in high school about here are your rights as they pertain to the law right now. You have, like the thing that I care so much about is landlord tenant stuff. So many people don't realize that they have the right to a safe, habitable place to live. If you're paying
Mm.
rent somewhere and you don't have hot water, that's not okay. And your landlord can't just say, too bad, so sorry, what do you want me to do? Your landlord has to fix it. By law, in most states, especially if you don't have hot water in winter months, most states in the United States and most places in the world have some kind of law that says you've got the right to hot water in the winter. And here's what happens if they don't do it. You can get out of your lease without having to pay a fee. You can hire a plumber to do it, and you can take that out of your rent. You can you can require the landlord to make the repairs. People don't know those things, but the problem is if we try to just teach people that in high school, then they're going to know a snapshot of the law, but the law is always changing,
Yes.
and people are getting more rights sometimes and fewer rights other times. And so we need to do both. We need to make it easier for people to know what their rights are, to know what the law is, but we also need to make it easier to navigate these processes so that I don't need to know everything about landlord tenant law in order to feel empowered as a renter. As a homeowner, I don't need to know everything about mortgage forbearance to to assert my rights to mortgage forbearance. When the government provides it. There's so it's these two things we need to try to make the rules better. I guess three things. We need to try to make the rules better for people generally. We need to show people easier ways to we need to teach people about the law more, about their rights more. I think that that's something across the whole world. People should know more about what their civil rights are. But then also where the rubber meets the road, government forms and online forms and going to hearings, all those kinds of things need to catch up to technology, and technology needs to go after them and streamline them so that it's not it doesn't take all day to fill out a form. What TurboTax, I don't TurboTax. I think a lot of people don't like them because they lobby the U.S. Congress to try to keep taxes complicated. But what they did was they said, here's this giant form. You don't need to fill out the form. We'll just ask you all the questions to get the information to fill out the form. And that kind of questionnaire interview process for document automation is all over the internet, and you're starting to see it more and more and more for legal docs. So 650 isn't the only people doing this. All kinds of organizations are finding what is a really onerous legal process with a ton of paperwork, and they're replacing it with these questionnaires. And as we were able to use AI more, to help surface questions that should be asked to people, those are going to get better and better. And I think those three, if we can, if we're making progress on all three fronts, helping people be more informed about their civil rights, changing laws and rules and policies to be more friendly to regular people, and changing the tools, giving people more technology tools to access, this paperwork and assert their rights and protect themselves and and defend themselves, in courts. That is just going to be better for absolutely everybody. I don't think anybody loses in that scenario. Even if you're the landlord who has to not evict somebody, because they asserted their right to a eviction moratorium or something. Generally speaking, an eviction crisis is bad for property owners because it lowers the values all over the place. Everybody in every society benefits when we do those three things, when we make laws better for normal people, help people understand their rights, and give them tools to assert those rights.
Yeah, like people having the knowledge, and I think it's like a twofold process. Like one, if people are taught some stuff at school, I think you spark some curiosity
Yeah,
in
definitely.
in them. It's like, you taught history at school, and not for everyone. But I think there's obviously you get people that build careers out of it. But I think a lot of people, they like watching a document. I think most people probably like a good documentary.
Yeah,
Um, uh,
yeah,
yeah, and obviously, so some might like an animal one, some might like, a pyramids one, something about the pharaohs, something, but it's still all history, and a huge part of that is sparked from studying history at school. And I think if they teach the legal system to a decent level at school,
yeah,
it'll spark the curiosity for a lot of people to be like, okay, I'm gonna maybe learn this a little bit more. Maybe there'll be some TV shows that come out of this change in society, and where they're talking about laws, and they're using real life examples, and they make it dramatic, they make it fun, but you end up learning about some stuff. And the other thing is, you'll probably know about this better than I will, there needs to be a search engine, if that doesn't already exist, that's
yeah.
really good, where it's like Google but literally just for legal stuff. So in that scenario, when you was talking about a tenant had not having hot water, like they could go onto their website, they could say, I am a tenant, I have no hot water, and instead of a million results on Google coming
Yeah.
up, like two articles come up that are like, maybe it references the law, and it tells you your rights, in that scenario, and you have your rights based on this, based on where you are, like something like that. I think would be amazing, and I think with AI, well, I don't know if you've
Oh,
seen Chat
absolutely.
GPT.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I think it could be done even without manually, or without a lot of manual curation.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like as you were talking, I was thinking about some things that I've seen demoed in videos or whatever that show really similar kinds of kinds of behaviors using AI. ChatGPT and OpenAI. I mean, it's incredible what you can do. The problem is ChatGPT and OpenAI um, are scouring the entire internet.
Yes.
If you could take that and you could say, okay, so here are the housing authority pages that have all the information. Just look at that. And I think that that's not too far off. I feel like what you're describing of somebody being able to go to a website, say, I live in Santa Monica, California, and I have cockroaches, and my landlord won't do anything about it. If you right now, and then it tells you, here are your rights, and here's what you can do, and here's the form you need to fill out to submit to the housing authority, and here's a letter you need to send to your landlord that shows that you tried to get them to fix it first. Like, that's something that seemed impossible a few years ago. Like, you couldn't even fathom what would need to happen to make that a reality. It would take so many hours, uh, because it's different in sometimes every single city. It's definitely different in every state. Sometimes within a state. In California, people in Los Angeles have totally different rights than someone in Richmond, when it comes to housing. So it seemed impossible, but now it seems really close. If you went onto ChatGPT right now and you asked that question, you'd get some pretty good results. It could probably even help you, point you in the right direction to start a draft letter. It could get you pretty far along. And I think the only limitation now is that it's not predictable. If you try to go to ChatGPT and ask it, you know, tell me what I should ask my landlord if I want them to fix my hot water, and they're legally required to in the state of Oregon. Like, it could give you a pretty good result, but if you ask it again, it would tell you something different, because it's scouring the entire internet. If only we can, I have no idea if this is something that will happen. I would love to see some sort of um, reservoirs, I guess, so to speak, built, where you've got like the ocean of the internet, and then this lake of, here's, a whole bunch of landlord tenant stuff. This is just landlord tenant law. And, so someone goes to a search engine, they say, I'm a tenant, it automatically knows to search that reservoir, instead of the whole internet. And then I'm in California, it knows to focus on that area of the reservoir. And then you get your question, and it's more specific. I feel like that kind of thing is, months or years away now. And, I hope that 650, I want 650 to be a big part of that. I want us to be the place where people go to find all their rights around landlord tenant stuff, or all their rights around debt collection stuff. But if it isn't us, it's going to be somebody. And that's really encouraging, because it's the tools are all out there. The knowledge is all out there. The hardest part now is just pointing people to the right thing for them and their situation. And that is closer now than it's ever been.
Oh yeah, and like you're saying, narrowing it down, because all the legal, like, you can get all of the law online. And so it's not
Yeah.
even like it's not online in written form. So it's literally a matter of somebody saying, okay, I'm going to use ChatGPT or something else to just scour these areas, on the web. So they call hard code it. So, just how, like you said, just this little lake. And, they scour that. And maybe even if it requires in the initial version somebody to have a few drop downs to say,
Yeah.
I'm in the US,
Yeah.
I'm in
Hmm.
this state, and I'm looking for legal help. Just those three drop downs will literally narrow it down to New York,
Yeah.
America, legal. Okay,
Yeah.
boom. And if you want to have a few more drop downs, what are you looking for help in legal? You're looking for help as a tenant. You're looking for help as somebody that's just been picked up by a cop, like
Yeah.
or a family member. What is it? And then from there, you can say, okay, we literally just need to go over these 10,000 pages, on the legal system. That's all we need to do. There's no point us going over tenant rights when you're talking about a murder case. Like, it doesn't make
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think it's complicated by the fact that all of the law is on the internet, but it's all over the place. Um, I've been talking a lot about name and gender marker changes because that's something that 650 did in Utah. We gone really deep on that problem, and a lot of the things that are really important are very hard to find. It's out there, you can find it, but you have to know where to look. And I think that's part of the power of AI is being able to scour the entire internet, in fractions of a second, versus days or weeks for a normal person. There's one thing where in Utah, let's say you change your name, you legally change your name. Your birth certificate, then you get a new birth certificate so you can get new ID, right? Your birth certificate by default will have your old name on it still. And that's not a huge deal for everybody, but let's say you're someone who's trans who doesn't want that old name, who thinks of it as a dead name. It's maybe a little bit triggering for you to see that name, and now it's on your birth certificate, and you can request for it not to be on there, but you have to ask in a very specific way. You have to ask on two, different forms, and you have to submit those forms. You have to ask way at the start of the process when you first submit the forms. And there's really, if you want to find that out on your own, it would take you an enormous amount of time to find out if it's even an option, that it's a problem, that it's a solvable problem, and what the steps are to solve it. AI can find that in fractions of a second if you point it in the right place. So uh, when we're talking about automating processes, it's not just taking stuff that's out there and pretty easily accessible and making it, a tiny bit more accessible, saving people a little bit of time. Some of these things are things that either someone won't even know to fix, so they don't even know it's a problem, or if they do want to fix it, it will take them so much time because they've got a human brain and they've got to try to scan a page to find the right thing, versus AI that can do it instantly. And if you take these, the expertise and of a person, the way that 650 learned about this thing about birth certificates was talking to a bunch of lawyers, and they told us all the problems with the name and gender marker change process and how to fix them. If you can take that kind of expertise, and then attach it to the power of AI to review, enormous amounts of data and pluck out the stuff that's relevant, That's life changing kind of stuff. And it felt like sci-fi a couple years ago, but now, with ChatGPT 4, who knows what we'll be able to do? There could be some really cool applications for access to justice, for health, for all kinds of very high stakes, kinds of solutions for people that fix big problems in their lives. And I got to tell you, I'm real excited to be here for it.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I was using GPT, generator the other day, and I was just sitting there. I mean, it was literally for this podcast. I think the last post I did on LinkedIn was Chat GPT generated. I was just sitting there. I was messing around with it, and because he had a few drop downs about doing it witty, doing it professional, and I chose witty. I chose a couple of other options, and I was like, my check my new podcast FireDEV. That's literally all I typed in, and it came out, and I looked at it, I was like, that looks pretty darn good. So I was like,
Yeah.
I think I tweaked a couple of things. Like part of it was spelling or capitalization, more specifically on a couple of things. Again, that was more how I wanted it to be done, and maybe one or two word changes. But other than that, I was like, it's a nice looking message. so I ended up posting it, and
Yeah.
people interacted with it, and I don't think there was a wise to the fact that he wasn't made by a human
Oh
or
yeah.
anything.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. We're getting into, uncanny valley of things that are so close to what we'd make ourselves. I mean, AI generated art blows my mind. And the thing is, it's just synthesizing what's already out there, but it's amazing what it can do with synthesis. What it can actually. It looks like it's coming up with it, from thin air. We use at 650. We've started playing around with using OpenAI to do like the first draft of like a blog post. Um, we we would love if we could use it for more serious applications. Helping somebody write an employment agreement or something. It's not quite there yet. It feels like it's a bit of a ways away from where it's going to actually displace, any professional writer, or anybody, especially who specializes in things like the law or health, where the details are so very important. But yeah, it's pretty wild when it can um, give us the first draft of a blog post, and then our content marketing manager doesn't need to write from whole cloth. She can go through and say, "Hey, this is a pretty good start, actually, ChatGPT. Thanks so much. I'm going to go through and just pump it up a little bit." And when someone reads it, it reads exactly like somebody wrote it from scratch. It's pretty incredible.
Oh yeah, like the results are definitely amazing.
I think the wildest thing about ChatGPT, that when this happens, my ears will perk up. It isn't a capability now. It's you know it's something that we talked about at 650. Wouldn't it be neat? And we tried to make it do this, we couldn't. Is to get ChatGPT to ask you a question. To say, if I can give you a bunch of data, and if I can tell ChatGPT, you need to know these things, these things, these things, these things, and I'm going to tell you these things. Can you formulate a question to ask me to gather those details? And we couldn't figure out, any way to do it. I think someone at Microsoft said it's not a capability. Microsoft, uh, heavily invested in OpenAI and is trying to find new applications for it. But that to me would be the game changer. If you can, you know, right now, so much of the problem with so many things is as a normal person, I don't know what I don't know. I don't know that I don't have a certain right. I don't know that there's a weird situation that applies to me that makes it harder for me to legally change my name or write a will or something. I don't know that until someone tells me or asks me, and that's, I think, one of the things that keeps OpenAI from being used in a lot of applications is that it can't go a level deeper and try to uncover things that you haven't told it. And so I'm sure there's a lot of other things that need to happen for to take it to the next level where it starts to replace entire jobs and industries. What will make me both very excited and incredibly nervous because I won't know what's next, is when ChatGPT or some derivative technology from OpenAI, when that is able to take a bunch of information and then ask me follow-up questions, I think that is going to be an inflection point.
Oh yeah,
And I
like having the more sort of inquisitive human touch to it.
Yeah, definitely. Just the ability to say, you know, hey, you haven't told me enough. I can't write you. We're always focused on legal documents. So I can't write you a privacy policy until you tell me X or Y. Um, when it gets to that level, that'll be unbelievable. And I think it's a possibility. I think it's not only possible but inevitable, and probably not that far off. I'm excited to see what ChatGPT 4 can do, and I think the sky's the limit.
Oh yeah, for sure. So talking about obviously legal stuff, what advice would you give to entrepreneurs of the things they need to have nailed down legally, and some things they can kind of just skip or just glance over when they're trying to survive when they're new.
Oh, really good question. If you're an entrepreneur starting a new business, and you want to make sure you've dotted your I's and crossed your T's, um, I, I'll put in a plug for 650. If you go to 650.com, all of the kind of basic documents that you need would be there. Generally speaking, so there's a specific plug, but generally speaking, I would say try to do as much as you can before you talk to an attorney. Just like anything, when you talk to an attorney, the more prepared you are, the better experience it's going to be, and the less money you're going to have to spend. So that's something that 650. We're not ever trying to replace attorneys. We're trying to make it so that an attorney can focus less time on busy work and paperwork and tedious stuff, and more time on the strategic thinking. So if you're an entrepreneur, you're starting a business, you want to make sure you're legally protected, you've organized everything the right way. I would say you see how much stuff you can find on your own, how much you can do yourself. There, your state website. In Utah, we have a whole section just for business owners, just for entrepreneurs. There's probably something like that in your state, in your city, in your county. I would also, recommend checking out 650, 650.com. We have a whole marketplace of really affordable automated docs, for every cycle, or every stage in your business life cycle, whether you're a brand new company, or you're, trying to get the right company ready to sell. We have all that paperwork. And then I would say, after you have all that together, it's still a good idea. Go and talk to a tax professional, go and talk to an attorney, but don't go in there empty handed. Come in there with all of this paperwork you've already generated yourself. Make sure that they agree that it's everything you need, and then I would recommend something like 650. You don't have to do 650, but something like that keeps up to date, because employment and business law and privacy law, those are all major, those should be a major concern for every entrepreneur right now. Those laws are changing faster than they ever have before. They have real impacts. It can be a big problem for you if you're not complying with a privacy law, for example. So don't try to be an expert. If you try to be an expert on privacy law, then you're not going to have any time to run your business. Find something like 650, where you can answer questions about yourself, and then it'll keep everything up to date for you. And uh, at least now, I'm not aware of anything that can replace an attorney. Even something as sophisticated and robust as 650, you're still going to, at least to occasionally talk to an attorney and make sure that you're on top of your renewals and your licenses and that kind of thing. I'm not an attorney, and my world is pro bono, so I'm not an expert on these things. But having worked in 650 marketing and having worked with our legal team a whole lot, those are kind of the main things that I've gleaned.
Okay, fair enough. So you have a lot of management experience. What would you say to somebody that's growing a company and beginning to hire people, like best things to do, like really important things to do?
Oh, I love that question. I think it all starts with knowing the kind of thing, knowing what you want, know the kind of company you want to build, know the culture you want to build, know the team that you want to build, have a good understanding of the expertise and skills that you actually need. I think one of the biggest mistakes that so many business owners make is they just hire kind of what they know. You know, they hire people they know, they hire the kind of roles they know. They say, well, I worked at a company before and we had to have a VP of sales and a customer success person and a marketing person and an engineering and product. So I'm going to do that here. You know, look at what you actually need, try to break it down if you can to the individual skills and behaviors that you need and hire for that. You know, I think another big thing we've seen, it's kind of a general trend is moving away from you need to have a specific degree or you need to have, a specific number of years in a specific job title. That tells you a lot, but it doesn't actually translate, if you look at the data, it doesn't actually translate reliably into good job performance. Look at what are the things that people need to do to be successful at this job, and then in your job interviews and in the resumes you're looking at, see if people have those skills, see if people have done that before. It seems like a pretty obvious thing, but so many companies I know, especially small companies that are just starting out, uh, they they look at a template, and they say, I should have this kind of thing. And to hire an engineer, I need to have an engineer who has these certifications. Look at what you actually need for your business and hire there. I think that's the most important thing, because if you that's your foundation. If you don't have a solid foundation, eventually things are going to come crumbling down sooner or later. And I think once you've got the team in place, a lot of founders, so many smaller companies are founder CEOs who are very passionate about what they do. They feel very strongly about how it should be done. That's a beautiful thing. Keep that passion, but I would advise people, you didn't just hire, so now you've built this team full of all this skill and all this talent that you've cultivated through a lot of hard work and tons of hours of interviews. Let them excel. Don't you know your business, your product, your solution, this thing that you want to get out in the world. You don't know digital marketing as well as the person you hire to do digital marketing. Let them do their job. you know um, I think it's a great idea for a CEO to say the goal of the company is X, but the goal of your department is up to you. It just has to get us to X. Like, I'm going to set the strategy for the company. Let your let your people that you hired who are the experts of what they do, let them set their agendas, let them set their schedules, let them set their goals and their strategies. And then your job as the founder, or the entrepreneur, is to try to just hold them accountable to those and make sure that they're all pointed at the same goal. uh, I think those two things, when you're just getting started, I've had the privilege and of working at a handful of startups. I really enjoy startup culture, entrepreneur culture, and I think if you have those things in place, you've got a great idea for what you want the company to be. You surround yourself with people who can help get you there, and then you empower them to do what they can to get you there. Uh, you know, from then on, it's just blocking and tackling, and doing it, getting the tedious stuff right.
Yeah. Always plenty of tedious stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so off the back of the previous question, what advice would you give to a subordinate who is under a manager to make the most of that employee and manager relationship? Because it's very common for employee to resent manager or
Yeah.
not work with them in a way that is mutually beneficial because manager wants to get the most productive work out of that employee. Secondary, a good manager would want them to be happy and fulfilled. And then employee wants money, wants to have career progression, all that sort of stuff. Like, how can an employee, what can they do to really make it easier for the manager and get the most out of that relationship?
Really good question. I think kind of an obvious one, but it's hard in practice is being honest, being open, being transparent. Um, if your manager's given you too much, if you've got too much on your plate, let them know. If you have too little on your plate, let them know. That's something people don't want to do.
Mm.
I think a problem that I've seen happen more than any other, in the startups. This is startup culture is a little different. Maybe this isn't universally, applicable, but somebody is really good at their job. They just knock it out of the park. Their manager doesn't have a great understanding, maybe of how long it takes to do something. Their manager has not loaded them up with enough to do, and they think, "Great, lucky me. My job is so easy. I am able to knock out these goals and and that's great. And I don't exceed them because I don't want to, I don't want to work harder than I need to, which is fine. That makes sense. The problem is eventually someone's going to recognize that. Eventually the boss's boss or somebody they're going to recognize that um, that there's a gap between your capacity and your performance. So whether you're being overworked or underworked, communicate it. Have an open line of communication with your boss. I know that sounds like an insane thing to tell your boss to give you more work. Or some people say, I don't want to tell my boss that I'm being overworked. I want them, I want them to respect me. I want to look like I'm super capable. But neither of those is sustainable. Eventually there will be a problem if you're overworked or underworked. It will become an issue. I promise you. It doesn't matter how big the company is. Somebody's going to notice if you're either overworked or underworked. So have an open line of communication, I'd say, is rule number one, and be honest. It's worth it, even if it's painful. Be candid in your one-on-ones with your manager. Be professional. Keep it to the stuff that is relevant to work, but be as candid as you can possibly be about how much you're working, about what you're able to perform, what you're able to accomplish, and even you know if you think there's a different way to do things. I think another part of it is make sure you're on the same page. It's so easy to not be on the same page with your boss and their boss. As much as you can, have skip level meetings. Talk to your boss's boss. Make sure that your goals aren't just aligned with your boss's goals, but with the company goals. Um, and and that's ultimately all that matters. If you're an engineer at a company and you may think that your project is the most important thing, of course, because you're the closest to it and you feel attached to it. It only matters if it serves the company's wider goals, because otherwise the company isn't going to succeed, and then you don't have a job, and it doesn't matter what you're working on. You know, Understand, if you can, try to get a feeling for what the company is trying to do. Ask people, and if nobody knows, then that's a problem, and you need to let people know, hey, I don't know if we have a strategy as a company. That's a big deal. But they probably do. They probably have a strategy. They probably have goals. Find out what all of those goals are. Find out the ones that are specific to your department, to your job, and make sure that what you're doing, it drives towards those goals. Make sure that you and your boss are on the same page about what that looks like. What does success look like? And, you say I'm doing a good job. Why am I doing a good job? Is it because this thing that I push to production helps us reach this specific goal? Okay, great. Um, the more that you understand your goals, how they align with the business's goals, and what the expectations are, what success looks like, the more that you help the company, which is good for everybody. But specifically for you, it means that when it's performance review time, you've got specific stuff to point to. You're not just saying, oh, I've been working really hard. I've been putting in a lot of overtime to push these things to production. You can say, I, deployed X code at, X number of times, which, helped push this product to market, and that product was profitable for us, and made X, had this much revenue, or this much churn reduction, or this much, user adoption. Try, like, when you understand success metrics and goals, you're able to personalize that for your job, which makes you a, a more valuable employee, not just to them, but for you. It means it makes it easier to get a raise. It makes it easier to hit performance bonuses. And if you feel like that isn't being rewarded, it makes it easier to find a place that will reward you the way you want to be rewarded.
Oh yeah, yeah. Like I said, communicating with them, and it goes both ways. But a lot of time, employees, don't communicate up, and they definitely
Oh, for
could,
sure.
put a bit more effort into that.
For sure. And it's not their fault. I just feel like that's not something that maybe is it's not a job skill you learn about. You learn about a lot of things to do a good job. You don't maybe necessarily learn. Talk to your boss. I remember, so many jobs I've had. I didn't want to have a one-on-one with my boss. It made me uncomfortable. So if my boss canceled our one-on-one, I was like, oh, phew, great. I don't have to
Hmm.
do it. I wasn't trying to push them to reschedule it. I was like, great. I don't have to worry about talking to my boss about my numbers, which haven't been so great this past month. Um, that that's the comfortable thing. The easy thing is to say nobody's noticing I haven't been performing, or nobody's noticing that I've been working my butt off, but I've had to work overtime. It's uncomfortable to have conversations, and it's not fun. Like a one-on-one is not a super fun. I've got a great relationship with my boss. I don't want to have one-on-ones with them, but it's important. The more that prep for your one-on-ones if you can, like take a couple minutes, don't work for free, but maybe take a couple minutes before your one-on-one. Just make sure, write down a few things you want to ask your manager, a few things you want to tell them. Um, a tiny bit of communication with your manager will go a long way toward making your relationship with them better, making the company, stronger, making you a better employee, which helps them, but also making your career better, increasing your earning potential. A lot of things that are really good for you that just take a little bit of extra effort and maybe discomfort.
Oh yeah, definitely communication is key. So, what aspects of the law do people not know about but really should? Obviously, you've been around a lot of this sort of stuff, so like, what would you say?
I'm sorry, you cut out for just a second. What do people not know but
Yeah,
should?
what aspects of the law do people not
Oh,
know about but really should?
ooh, wow, that is. I think the main thing is people don't know anything about the law, and you should at least try to know what
Something.
your you should try to know what your rights are. Yeah, I think um, I it's too big a topic, I think, to give a good answer. I mean, it's a great question. I think it's such. The answer is everything. Everything in a perfect world, everybody would know everything about the law, but they'd also know everything about their own body and
Yes.
about the environment. There's a lot of things that we should know. I think if I had to say it one thing, it's like um, there are some things. There are things that are legal problems, or I guess are legal good things like rights that you have that you may not think about. There's a guy named Dino Himonis here in Utah who's an access to justice pioneer, and I get to work with him a lot, which is great. And one of the stories he talks about a lot is a study by Legal Services Corporation, and I forget the numbers, but it was about how many people don't recognize a problem as a legal problem, something bad in their life that's happening that they don't recognize as a legal problem. They just think it's a bad thing in their life. They think it's punishment or something like that. If you're getting evicted from your apartment, that is a legal process, and you don't have to wait until you're actually in court um, to understand what your rights are and try to nip it in the bud and get a better situation for yourself. If someone's trying to collect a debt from you, that is a legal process. You have rights. You can ask them not to hound you. You can say, "Do not call me at work," and they can't call you at work. You have a lot of rights around things that you might not know about. I'd say so. In a couple words, I would say things that you don't know about the law that you should are that you have a lot more rights than you think. You have, the rights. We didn't stop getting rights in the United States when we, got the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Like, you have a lot of rights. Your rights can be different in different cities and states and counties. There are things that you are entitled to that you don't know about. I guarantee that. And then number two is don't wait for it to become a legal problem. If something is bad enough in your life, odds are it will eventually become a legal problem for you. Try not to let it wait that long. It's really stressful to engage with these things. I understand, the motivation to procrastinate. I have absolutely, you know, in years past, I have absolutely let a debt go out of control. A couple $100 can turn into thousands of dollars, and then you're in court and you have no defense, and now your credit is ruined. Because you didn't want to pick up the phone and say, "Hey, I can't pay you $200, but I can pay you $20 a week for 10 weeks. Can we do that instead?" Um, the things in your life that are stressful to you, you may have rights that protect you, and don't wait. Don't wait until you're getting served papers to take care of a debt or a parking ticket. Don't wait, until you're in court to take care of your late rent. You know, there are options that exist that aren't the ones you know about. If your landlord says you got to pay me $5,000 or get out, you might have other options. Just start again, communication is key. Start a dialogue with them. Try to figure out what your rights are, and more often than not, you'll be able to find something. You'll be able to solve a huge problem in your life in a lot easier way than you thought was possible.
Yeah, I think that's some good advice. Like, so many times it could potentially be legal, and just you know having a look, there might be some other avenue that you can take, something to help you.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, and I mean, this is kind of linked to the other one, so feel free to skip here or just give a quick answer because they sound very similar. Are there any hacks or things to navigate the law that are not known by the majority?
Oh, really good question. I wouldn't say there are hacks necessarily, but there are. I mean, there are nothing specific. There are millions of hacks. When I was talking earlier about birth certificates, that's something I would kind of consider a hack. Most people don't know that if you change your name, you'll still have your old name on your birth certificate. Most people don't know that that happens at all. The people who do know don't know that they can prevent that from happening, that they can request that not happen. And then the people who know that, they don't know how to go about requesting it. So that is a little hack, but that's a really specific thing, that doesn't broadly apply to people. I think maybe the best hack that's actually actionable that you can use right now is free legal clinics and legal aid. You can, if you go on the internet, you can find out a little bit about stuff, but honestly, you're just as likely to get misinformation as the right information. Unless you're getting information from like a government site, like a court site, you might get bad information or just old information. But if you go to a legal aid organization, they can answer your questions, and you can be confident that the answers are right. A lot of people don't know that legal aid is available. A lot of people don't know that if they can't afford, it's kind of like your Miranda rights. If you can't afford an attorney, we'll provide one for you. Um, in most places in the world, if you need legal help and you can't afford it, there are pro bono attorneys. There are legal aid organizations. People call them LSOs, legal services organizations, who will give you free legal advice and legal help, no strings attached. And you just got to fill out some forms to apply for it. So if you can't afford an attorney, if you earn less than like 150% of the poverty rate in your area, there's a really good chance you can get free legal aid. Just search for legal aid your city, and I would be shocked, even if you're in a rural area, I'd be shocked if you don't see some good results. They're easier to talk to than you might think, and they can point you in the right direction. They may not be able to help you with the entire problem, but they can answer your questions, they can help you get started, and they can point you in the right direction.
I mean, yeah, there's so many times people just like they feel like they can't reach out to people.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like to professionals, either that it'll cost a lot. Like I even say to people, you know, or when I'm about to do something and someone saying, can't do it, I'll be like, I'll ask. Worst case, they say no. Like an
Yeah,
accountant or a lawyer is not going to shoot me if I ask them a question that I need to pay for and I don't want to pay for it. They'll just say I'm not going to, provide you with this service, which is fine. There's so many times that even if they don't, technically provide it for free, they'll probably have like a 5 minute chat on the phone with you. Like
yeah, exactly.
you find quite a lot of people are nice enough to do that. Don't get me wrong. I've come across plenty of people. You ask them a question, like you just ask them the time, and they're working in a clock shop, and they won't answer.
Oh, there, yeah.
They'll say they're too busy looking at the time.
Another, yeah. There are jerks. Don't let the jerks dissuade you, though.
Yes.
There are jerks out there. Don't let them get you down. Another. This is definitely a hack, but it only works in the United States. It's a number called 211. If you need help, if you're like getting evicted or you've got medical bills you can't pay, like you've got like an emergency problem and you're not sure who to talk to, 211 is available in most parts of the United States, and it's if you go to 211.org is the website version, but if you just dial 211, you'll get connected to somebody. The volunteers are different. Here in Utah, it's the United Way, and they will connect you. So like, let's say, well, I'm getting evicted, but I don't know if I need legal help, financial help, or something else. Or I'm getting evicted because of medical bills. So should I talk to someone about medical help? About financial aid? Should I talk to someone about eviction stuff? If you call 211 or go to 211.org, they will help connect you to the right people. They've got enough experience. You can say, here's the problem. And they can say, okay, here's some free resources in your community. So that's like a nice, even step above legal or aid organization. If you don't even know where to start with 211 and you'll be in pretty good shape. I only learned about 211, like I knew it existed, but I had no idea how much it did until COVID. I was trying to find places to point people to when they would ask, we helped with eviction. They'd say, okay, well, what can I do about this other stuff? I had no idea. And then someone told me about 211 and I went down the rabbit hole, and my goodness, it's incredible.
Oh yeah, there's definitely stuff like that that you can reach out to, and yeah, I
Absolutely.
mean obviously it's only for America, but I appreciate you letting the listeners know that you can just ring this number. It's a 3 digit number, but it's one of those ones that I know 911.
Yeah.
So obviously I'm not in America, but like that one and maybe one or two others they probably know. But there's again, it's probably a thing they need to probably nail down in school a bit more. Just some
Oh, I
crucial
know.
numbers,
Yep. I
crucial,
agree.
things. I think it'd be far better remembering that than the presidents of the United States.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. Imagine that. News is just in. All American schools are taking away teaching of American presidents for
Yeah.
American phone numbers.
Yeah, exactly. So if I need to know, who the 15th president of the United States was, I can look it up on Wikipedia.
Google it. Yeah, it's
Exactly. I
you,
don't need to memorize that anymore.
yeah,
Yeah.
we live in a time where you can just Google it. I mean, okay, knowing about certain ones and certain things they've done, maybe let's say Abraham Lincoln, for example, and obviously George Washington. That's fair enough, but some of the kind of filler presidents
Yeah.
in
I don't need to
between
know
where
about
they didn't do
Rutherford,
much.
Franklin Pierce. Who needs them?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
the
If I
so
want to
many.
learn history, if I'm going to be a historian, I'll learn about Rutherford B. Hayes. And otherwise, who cares? Forget him. We don't
Yeah,
need him.
you just Google it because it's literally one of those things where you're not. It's not like maths or science where you need a bit of more intellectual skill to and rigor to actually work something out. It literally the things that you'll come out of school with is what you can Google and just be like, okay, he was born here, became president here. Da, da, da. It's just facts.
Yeah.
You can get that off Google. It's whereas obviously something else, writing as well, English for example, it's a bit more sort of process oriented. You have to actually do something. Whereas just knowing facts, yeah, it's not as important.
Yep, 100% agree. Yeah, these days especially, we need to be better at like strategic thinking and understanding why things happen. and not we need to spend a lot less time memorizing specific facts because we're in an age where you don't need that. You need to know how to think and how to how to plan, but not specific. It's like when you're in math class and your teacher's like, well, you're not going to be carrying a calculator around with you. Guess what? Yes, I do. I carry a
You
calculator around with
literally
me
do.
everywhere. Yeah. So, maybe I should have spent more time on the more advanced math stuff and less time on, times tables.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, I'm kind of of the opposite mindset where I think it's quite important that people know how to utilize mental maths. But then again, I think it's important that you know that there's certain formulas and tricks that you can use your calculators for.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely. Uh-huh.
so I feel because I remember that people, it's one of those. I'm a guy that loves math, but people always say, why do you need this? Why do you need that? And like people say, like, why do you need to know how to work at the area of a circle? And I'm like, do you buy pizza? Like
Yeah.
I mean, literally,
Yeah.
you
Uh-huh.
can figure out if buying two smaller sizes of pizza for $10 is better than buying the large for the same amount. And like people will just say, okay, let's say again, I don't know which one works out better, but like 2 7 inches, they'll add the two sevens up and be like, it's 14, whereas
Yeah.
the other one's 12 inch.
Yeah.
Clearly, it's better.
This is what
Whereas,
the pizza place wants you to do. The pizza place wants you to think that they're getting a better deal, and they don't
yeah,
want big pizza does not want you to know how to
no, they
calculate
don't.
the area
Yeah.
the area of a circle.
Whereas if you know that you can do pi r, squared, use a
Yeah.
calculator if you want it. You can do it really fast with a calculator, knowing that. And again, you don't need to even do pi. Just do free. Like it
Yeah,
doesn't need to
that'll
be
get you
not.
close enough.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
doesn't need to be precise enough. And I remember I did it once with a friend, and like the difference of the area was. It was like no way. It was
Yeah.
a huge amount difference, and I was like, yeah, like that's how they get you. And especially when you got all these other deals, when you got get this and that, once you factor everything in, you realize you're not actually getting a deal. Yes, there will be scenarios where buying the two is better. Maybe you got two different people, they don't want to share, they want two different pizzas, whatever it is, they're going to two different offices, whatever. But understanding and being able to use this stuff is very important. But yeah, going back to what we were saying, knowing presidents' names not as important as knowing a few laws and a few tricks and a few numbers.
Yep, I 100% agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I do have more questions, but we've already been going for over 2 hours. I know you've got places to be. I'd rather save these questions for potentially a future podcast. What I
Yeah.
do want to ask is some fun generic questions I like to ask all my guests at the end,
Great.
and I always like to see how they respond to this. What would you rather have, $5 million up front or $500,000 a year for the rest of your life, and why?
Ooh, 5 million up front, 500,000 for the rest of my life. Oh man, that is that's a great question. I ooh, I feel like um with inflation, I think I'd take the 5 million up front. I feel like I don't know what inflation's going to do to that 500,000, in 10 years. Uh, where if I invest 5 million now, I've got a pretty good idea of what I can get from it, and it would, I'd want to use that to, start a business, invest, buy land, buy things that I know are going to grow at, the amount that I can have a little bit more say over than inflation and 500,000 a year. That's a good question. I like that.
Okay, fair enough. And favorite board game?
Risk.
I mean, we do have that. Played it a couple of times. Takes a while.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's one of those games you have friends over, you play for hours and then you take a picture of the board so you can pick up where you left off later on, but I love it.
Yeah, I feel like every time we've played Risk, we've never played it properly, correctly.
I don't think anybody knows the rules of that game.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's different everywhere you go.
yeah. Okay, favorite video game, if you like a video game.
So I haven't played games in a while, but I always loved the Final Fantasy series. So
Okay,
I haven't played a Final Fantasy game in maybe 15 years, but that was the last game I got really into was Final Fantasy 12, and I've always loved those games.
fair
Just
enough.
big epic games.
Okay, this one I really love. This is the sort of the question, like the holy grail question I like asking everyone. Does money buy you happiness, and why?
Really good question. I think it doesn't buy you happiness, but it sure helps. I think that you need a certain number of you talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You got to have safety. I think happiness is like self-actualization. I think that you need to have enough so you're not worried about where your next meal is going to come from, and you're not worried about where you're going to sleep at night, and you feel like you can you can spend your time on you, and you have enough time to do the things you love. I think it takes a certain amount of money to do that. I think that money can buy you uh, some of the things that you need, but I know a lot of I know a lot of stressed out, real, not super happy rich people. I know a lot of very, very happy, practically broke people. So it certainly isn't a reliable way to buy happiness, but you need some of it. You need it's hard to be happy when you're worried about where you're going to live. You need someone who was raised very poor. I think an appreciation for you got to have a little bit. You got to have enough to survive and enough to do a little bit more than survive before you can do the things that make you really happy, like express your creative passions.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's one of the things. It gives you a lot of freedoms.
Absolutely, yeah.
And what does a good life mean to you?
I love that. A good life. I think a good life is a life of health, a life of uh, friendships, relationships, meaningful relationships with people, um, love and family and meaning. I think a good life is a life that means something. Um, I'm a bit of a nihilist myself. I don't assign too much meaning, but I think that a person's life does have purpose and have and meaning and value. And I think that a good life, a meaningful life, is one where um, you get a you care about something enough to try to get really good at it and and use it to make other people happy and make their lives better too.
I like that. Yeah, that's definitely a good one. Being a good person and
Definitely.
making knowing that the world is slightly better because you was in it.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and the people around you are better, off for you being in there. And I think to add to that, if there are people in your life that you can't, no matter how much you try, you just can't be good around for whatever reason, whether they just you know get under your skin the wrong way or they're a bad influence, then distance yourself around them and surround yourself around people with people that elevate you, but also that you can elevate as well. Because there will be people sometimes this close family that you just can't be positive around, and
Yeah.
it is what is it. It is what it is, and but create another family of sorts and be positive to them and make their lives better.
I couldn't agree more. I absolutely agree. Yeah, I think that it's all about having an impact, being um, being a pleasant and helpful part of other people's lives, and just generally, but especially for the people closest to you, the people who matter the most to you. And I think a key part of a good life is having people that matter to you and having people that you matter to. You know, if you're healthy, you've got you've got a big advantage. You know, not everybody is blessed with good health. I think that if you're healthy, be thankful for it. I think that health is a big part of a happy life. I think if you do what you can to try to improve your own health, improve the health of people around you, and have good relationships that really mean something to you and mean something to them. Then you got those two things. You've got a really good start for a good life.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, that's actually all, the questions for this episode. Really appreciate you coming on, Ransom. I really enjoyed the podcast. A little different to some of my other ones, but it was definitely great hearing about your time at WeWork, the work that you do at 650, your sort of advice for people, for entrepreneurs, for just general day to day advice, and it was a fun podcast.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having me on. I hope to talk to you again sometime.
No problem. If you like the podcast, feel free to, subscribe on any of your chosen platforms, Spotify, Google, and Apple. And I'll see you in the next episode. Bye bye.